Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Wow, that was an unexpected week. Thank you as a shout out to the unexpected shout out by Board Game Co. Welcome to all of the new subscribers that are checking this out. So hopefully you like what you see and it's worthwhile and you feel like staying. If not, hey, that's okay. To each their own. I'll skip over the perfunctory beatbox opening that I normally do in case you're new. You're probably wondering, is he serious right now? Or is he joking? Huh? Gonna make you go check out other videos to see if I'm joking or not, aren't I? As you click on subscribe. Anyway, so what are we talking about now? We're talking about the games that have launched on Kickstarter this week. There's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot. I'm gonna try and go over them with a little bit more brevity this week, just because of a lot of the rules and some of the actual gameplay I was able to dig out with some of these before they launched via some of their Board Game Geek pages. So I probably won't go into as much depth in that aspect, but there's just a lot of quality stuff coming out, and that makes it really tough on the wallet because I think we all wish, okay, if I had unlimited funds, I would probably be backing more things. Now, I wouldn't be backing everything, but there'd definitely be some stuff I would pick up that I have to sort of ration with otherwise. If you want to see me less ration, I have a Patreon. Anyway, enough about the side stuff. Let's talk about what's launched this week. So it's going to be a lot of the repeat hits from last week, but just with a little bit more depth and clarity. The first one is CULTivate, where you're this leader of a cult trying to get the most followers, trying to get the most points by placing these meeples on your double-sided board. Each of them has various points. There are various abilities. There's investigators that can block other people's columns, so there's a little bit of take that. You have to fill them from the top to the bottom, so there's an order and a sequence to things. And it's all wooden, which honestly is a little bit refreshing. And I think that's the reason why you see the price point at $35 here as the starting pledge level. The $45 gets you a little bit of the holographic side of things. Excuse any technical issues with this video. I have a cat right now that is a little bit frisky and wants to play. His name is Loki. It's very fitting. Anyway, so what are you going to get? You can see all of what you're going to get with this. They give a nice how to play. You get your own agenda, so you can base your strategy a little bit there to get some bonus points in terms of how these workers are placed, because these are the color workers that you need to correspond with at the end of the game. Then the investigator that I mentioned can block certain of these columns, and you have to give up a certain amount of points, or there are certain cards that you can draw from the deck to mitigate or to move a meeple or an investigator. You're also allowed to make exchanges with follower meeples, not only from your own compound, from other people's compound as well, sort of to sabotage their efforts. Now, in order to prevent or mitigate that, you have the ability to lock down the whole column when you complete the column, but only when you complete it. So there is a little bit of a rush to do that, but also not a rush so much so that you may be losing out on the other agenda or the bonuses that way. Overall, I mean, this is the type of probably very easy to get to the table indie, smaller developer type game that I like seeing on Kickstarter. It's only within the first 24 hours at 50%, but I would be surprised if this doesn't fund. And this is just something that would be really nice and straightforward. Something that I could probably even play with my kids. That's a little bit of the next step up. And depending on how cutthroat you want to make it, whether or not you want your kids to cry with you or not. So this is a game, like I said, if I did not have to be selective and more choosy, I feel like this would be a nice game to buy for a collection as just something nice. Something that is going to be straightforward, something that is a change of pace, and something that I could see getting to the table frequently, something that could help increase your H index if you're into that sort of thing. Or a 10 by 10, if you will. So all in all, it's a great price point. I really like that, and this is the stuff that, again, like if I had unlimited funds, I'd be backing this. Vendetta from a week or two ago, again, as a simple, straightforward, light, easy to play game. Games like this are why we do Kickstarter. I just got another one of these in the mail today. That is the whole reason and the rationale behind doing Kickstarter, apart from the games that are more off as a pre-order, which, depending on how you feel, you can go either way. I won't get into that right now. So that is CULTivate. I mean, it's going for 35 more days. There you go. Next up is Roman Roll, the Gladiators expansion. David Turksey and PSC Games. This is the Euro gamers roll and write, period. Straightforward, very heavy, lots of decisions, lots of options, lots of what do you want to do and what are your options going to be, almost too much in that sense. Goes without saying, this is not going to be a game for me. This is not a roll and write that I am a big fan of because I am not a heavier gamer. But that's okay, because I feel like this is a nice branching point in terms of the genre, as roll and writes were really the big 2019 theme, and it gives it a little bit of separation from all of the other roll and writes out there, especially for those that are looking for something a little bit meatier but want something distinctly different than what's out there in the first place. And so this is the expansion. They're basically just adding more of a good thing, like all good expansions. You have your Colosseum, you have your Gladiator side of things that they're really incorporating and trying to stay true thematically to. $29 though, I mean, it's a little expensive for a roll and write for just the expansion. And so that would be my biggest hesitation. And how much do you love this game? An expansion as a roll and write. I mean, there are plenty of roll and writes for 2/3 the cost of this expansion alone that are very, very well done and highly thought of at the retail level already, that there's not a whole lot of risk with. Now, this game has been out for long enough that you should be able to get a well-informed opinion about the base game, about whether or not it's going to be for you. So that's less in question. But I mean, $85 is a lot for a roll and write. And if you love this, I mean, it looks like it's coming with the expansion, the core game, miniatures on a roll and write. A roll and write Euro that has miniatures. A sentence I never thought I would be saying as a board game enthusiast right there. And you're getting all the stretch goals. So I mean, that's a lot of money for a roll and write. That sort of reminds me of the Railroad Inc., where it's like $150 for all these versions and all these mini expansions for the Railroad Inc., separate dice and things like that. Like, you have to be like playing this dozens of times, I feel like, to get your money's worth on a game like this, because the comparison price wise, I mean, this is the price wise of a full deluxe Euro. And so you really probably have to love the combination of the two of these, not like roll and writes and like Euros, but like them both in the combination. And so that is definitely a pledge of, I've tried this before I buy it, and I want to get all of this because I'm going to use all of this to the full extent. I can't talk too much about the gameplay itself. I mean, it is a roll and write, essentially, at its core. So it's not a whole lot of variable there, but you can just see on this actual page, as this is your player board, look how many areas there are. I mean, 6 on the bottom, 4 on the top, one of them obviously being the scoring track, but each of them with multiple things within an area. That's a lot of stuff going on. My mind doesn't work that way. My brain does just not focus that side of things. So, I mean, it looks like it's just going to be a lot of more of a good thing. It's also an example of how much more of a good thing do I need as well. So I can't speak to whether or not some of these additions are completely necessary or how much variability there's going to be, because I don't really know it from the base game. But if you want something different, if you're looking for something completely different than the roll and write genre, I mean, this is it. It's just whether or not this completely different thing is going to be right for you or not. That's really the question. And for me, it's an easy pass. But if you're looking for something heavier out of that genre, I haven't really seen anything else like it. So, Roman Rome, Gladiators plus the base game. Check it out. So next up on the Tuesday splurge of all the games is Crimson Company, the latest expansion from this 2-player dueling game, Wildwood Tales. They're also offering a digital version that right now you can play for free on mobile and PC. So there's a little bit of digital content there as well. Now let's just talk about the board game side of things. This is the 4th Kickstarter campaign they've done, really the 5th overall, because the first one was more of a print and play. And these guys have done a fabulous job with this game. Honestly, I'm surprised this one doesn't fund higher, because I think it's really a unique concept. And there's not really much that I can compare it to. I'm actually a backer from the previous campaign, and I have a feeling that I may end up getting the one new expansion from this game as well. And they talk about it as a game of strategic skill, and it really has more skill than luck. There is an element of luck in terms of what characters you're pulling as you go back and forth between the duelists, but you have a lot of options and ways to mitigate that in terms of which guys you're going to be pulling and how you're going to be placing them on your board. The price point is really good too, just from a returning backer standpoint. $11 for an expansion, and they're not overcharging. It really takes what you may know from the dueling. So what are you doing in this game? You have this shared deck that you're both drawing from, and so you have access to the same cards that your opponent is going to be drawing from. You're recruiting, you're placing them in one of the 3 columns, because whoever captures or wins 2 of the 3 columns is going to win. They all have special abilities depending on when you play them, or how you play them, or where you play them. Or you're going to have the potential to outbid your opponent if you want the card that they just drew using the money that you have. Whenever you get 4 characters in one of these columns that I mentioned, you score it and it's over. You have ones that will affect ones in their own lane, their other lane, ones that are in front of them, ones that are behind them, ones that are across the way. So there's a lot of variability there. If you want a more simplified version, go to the Rules Girl 2-minute overview. Again, I'm really surprised this doesn't fly onto a lot of other people's radars who are looking for something more streamlined as a 2-player dueling game. I think it's worth a shot. You definitely don't have to go for the all-in at this point, but they offer, a relatively good price point for $48 for a lot of the base game, the 2 expansions, and the huge game board. So you're getting your money's worth there, especially if this has any interest to you. I mean, I don't think you need to get the $97 by any means, because that's getting you the miniatures, the metal coins, the castle card, all this other stuff that maybe you don't want to at the first place. But this is probably enough information in terms of retail that you can get a gist of whether or not it's for you. What are they adding? 20 new character cards, and they're also adding these vanilla character cards to allow a little bit easier transition into the game in the first place, because you have all these abilities and these combos that might be a little overwhelming for someone playing it for the first or second time. All in all, I really like it. I'm going to be getting the new expansion. Period. That's all you need to know. Okay, so on to the 6-digit ones. So this is Tiny Epic Dungeons, Scott Alms, Gamelin Games, and this is their latest product. It's already almost at 11,000 backers. You are less than about 12 hours in at this point. It's already raised over $500,000. The price point, as I mentioned in the preview video, is less than I expected. It's $25 for the retail base game, which you shouldn't go for, and it's $30 for the deluxe. $40 for the gameplay all-in, which gets you the extra expansion for the stories expansion. Now the deluxe times 2, great. And now the interesting thing, I'm just going to touch on this, is these honorary producers, this $255 pledge level, which basically just gets you an airshipped copy a little bit sooner than everyone else. And you get this producer credit and an autograph certificate. Like, I mean, you're basically paying $200 some plus to get one airshipped to you sooner than everyone else. People want that, apparently. And I understand it's, if you're not first, you're last nowadays in the board game scene, but my own personal preference is, go, if you have that much money to burn, more power to you. Okay. 1 to 4 players, 30 to 60 minutes. You're getting these miniatures. Now, this is obviously, I mean, even if these are 28 millimeter miniatures, that's going to be a bigger box than the previous. They've already said that they're going to limit the stretch goals because of the box size. I think the artificially low funding goal, I mean, come on, you put it at something higher with some of these campaigns, but you got to be able to talk about how many X minutes you funded in. And you're getting cards. You're getting lots of cards. You're getting 8 heroes in the core. You're getting a lot of the equipment and the loot cards. A little bit of dice, just a little bit of everything you'd expect with a dungeon crawler. And they've gone with the tokens, the meeples that are going to be screen printed as well. They've already unlocked stretch goals. There's going to be wood upgrades as well to some of the other components. Like I said in the preview video, you have epic monsters that you're going to be fighting in the boss phase of things, where you have to lure them to the ritual rooms in order to actually damage them in the first place. You got to get legendary loot. You got to get the better spells. You got to equip your hero card in terms of the better equipment to be able to do damage and to defeat the villains in the first place. I mean, it seems like, at least in the base game, you're getting a little bit of minion variety. There's only 8 of them, and you get tokens with each one of them, which have already been upgraded, as you can see on the picture here. It is what it is. It's going to give you a little bit of variability, and it's going to give you a quick play time, and it's going to be at a slightly lower price than what a larger dungeon crawler would be able to do. It is what you pay for. As is true in a lot of life, what you pay for is what you get. You are getting a small dungeon crawler. You are not getting the depth, necessarily the replayability, necessarily the complexity that would come with a larger price point. And take that for what you will. A lot of people want that introductory, they want that easy to get to the table, they want that play style of things, and that's okay. And if that's what you want, and that's what you're looking for, I think this fits that. But personally, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for more of the full experience. I'm looking for the more tactical nature of things, especially when you talk about all the exclusives that sometimes come with this versus the retail. I don't know. I mean, I don't really feel like, especially with a game that's whole premise is trying to have a small imprint, throwing miniatures there, I just think it's completely unnecessary, especially when you made this whole big thing earlier with previous games about having the meeples and really utilizing meeples everywhere, and then coming up with this whole trademarked meeple holding item system. You know, like, why go away from that, I guess? I guess that strikes me as a bit odd, but anyway. I mean, if you're going to get it at the Kickstarter level, you need to get the deluxe version, because at least then I think it would hold its value somewhat. Here you get to see all the stretch goals, you're getting new sculpts, you're getting story upgrades, more loot, more loot. They talk about limitations, but I mean, there's clearly a ton of them, so we'll see how far up it goes. You've got a surprising number of videos already, obviously, out there. Now, the weird thing is they talk about, and I guess this is the side tangent here, they talk about the fact that right here, let's see if I can find this. Below are previews of the game in prototype form. They may include content that are stretch goals and may not be yet unlocked. So basically, what that sort of tells me is you expect to unlock them. You are planning on unlocking them, really. So the stretch goals are more of just a false stretch goal then. You know, that's more and more, like just with the CMON, you know, it's the same thing. People flack CMON all the time for making these fake stretch goals and spacing them out further, and, you know, shame on you. These guys do the same thing. So, you know, if you're going to criticize one, criticize everyone. If you're okay with one, be okay with everyone. Side rant over. But you can get plenty of videos. There's Man vs. Meeple, there's Dice Tower, there's Quackalope, there's Rado. Every view, every opinion that you're going to be interested in. Game Boy Geek, Board Game Coffee. Everybody is out there getting their video in at this point. Even Geek Dad with a written review. So that's about all you need to know, I think. I can't really summarize it any better. These games are either for you or they're not. They tend to be hit or miss in terms of which ones people like and which ones people don't like. So it's going to raise a lot of money. It's going to have all those stretch goals unlocked. And it's got 3 weeks left. So check it out, watch the video, get a good idea of what you like. Depending on the interest of this, I may do a video on whether or not to back it, more in depth. But I try not to do some of these should you back videos unless I can see a rule book, because it doesn't really give me a good sense otherwise about what may be missing or what nuances I'm not seeing in some of the videos, especially if there's a prototype or there's a scenario-driven video. And so I don't really see one up, so hopefully they will have one up sometime during the campaign. I'd be more interested then, but we'll see. So there you go, Tiny Epic Dungeons. Next up is Candy Wars. Candy Wars is a 3D terrain-esque using children, family-friendly dungeon crawler with the obvious Candy Wars theme. It's a third of the way there, and let's see what you're going to actually doing. There's a 48-hour early bird special. It's fully cooperative, but they also have this competitive mode. King of Average did a review with his pluses and minuses, so if you do nothing else, I think it's worth looking at his video, and even if you want to get just the bare bones synopsis of it, going to the end where he gives his final thoughts, because he does an absolutely fantastic breakdown of the positives and negatives in this scenario. And so I give him a lot of kudos because he does a lot of good work on the pros and cons, even on a preview video. I really enjoy seeing that. I think the main thing he talks about is, yes, it's fun. Yes, it's easy. It has the overcrowding issue on the tiles with these miniatures that he was concerned about. There is the 3D element, so there definitely is that playing into the actual gameplay and the tactical nature of it, because apparently you can change it and you can destroy it and you can even push characters off of it. You can also have your own character, but it seems like the asymmetry necessarily isn't there. The characters are all pretty much the same generic molds, but how you use them and how you upgrade them is more of the difference, rather than them having unique abilities or unique characteristics in and of themselves. So they talk a little bit in the rulebook here. I'm just going to break away and go to this for a second. As you know, the basic theme of this is you move and you attack, or you attack and you move. There's a distance in which your card can move 2 spaces plus whatever the bonus is, and then you're placing your attack card on top of the gnome that you're using. And so it exhausts him in that sense. You also have a free ability that you can use as one of these little green cards that interacts with a token of the tile that you're on. Hero phase, bad guy phase, and they call the bad guys gluttons. And like I mentioned, the big thing that sort of differentiates this, not only being more kid-friendly, is that you can destroy the scenery, damage tiles, bridges, targets of attacks. And so when they're destroyed, if it's not the ground floor, the characters on top of it fall below, suffering fall damage. So that's unique. I'd like to see that incorporated in a few other games potentially. I mean, that is the basic gist of this game. Now, I was a little concerned because I looked at this rulebook before doing this video a little bit, and it's 70 pages long. But that's mainly because they've included a lot of the scenarios, because there's a campaign scenario that goes into this whole thing, as well as there's conquest competitive scenarios as well. So they're all thrown in the beginning. If this sounds like something you may have seen before in terms of the attack and the move, it's because it's by a couple guys that you may recognize from a few other games: the Chronicles of Drogonor, the Towers of Arcanos, as well as Masmorra Dungeons of Arcadia. So there's some mechanisms definitely taken from those games and incorporated here. I don't know. This doesn't intrigue me. Like I said before, it doesn't do anything for me. I think it's an interesting theme. It's a kid-friendly theme, but my kids want to play kid games or they want to play dad games. And so this falls in between. And if it's not going to get my attention, I'm going to be less likely to proposition it to my kids to play. It's not necessarily something I'm going to want to get out and play myself or with my group. $69 is a relatively decent price for a miniature-esque heavy game with some terrain tiles like that. But for me, it's going to be a pass just because of the competition is so fierce for the dungeon crawl, for the time and the table space. I have no interest in it from that standpoint. But it definitely is not something you've seen in terms of the theme or the elements. So it's definitely going to get some attraction just from that space. Next up is Orconomics, the 2.0 version, or the second edition overall. It's already almost funded. They're going for a lower funding goal because it's not a terribly well-known game to begin with. I had to look this one up in the first place. It is more of an economic style game with a lot of take that, backstabbing, deal making, where you're an orc. I mean, when was the last time you had an orc party, right? 2 to 5 players. You're trying to establish companies in all of these different sectors on the board here that you can see. So there's 10 sectors. You want to get a company in each one of those. So they're marketing the premium edition. Like a lot of games nowadays, it's all the rage. So what are you getting in the premium edition? You're getting miniatures. You're getting this better set game board. And I like this because this increases the modularity. Industry cards, quest cards, how you're getting points, tokens, skulls, tokens. Okay, they got a whole bunch of optional stuff here. Funding goals. You're getting your daily unlocks. Can I just say, I like pages that have a simplified explanation. Like I don't mind reading a rulebook. It works better for me than doing it as a tabletop simulator gameplay follow through. But these are just very nice and concise if they're done correctly. So what do you actually need to know about this game? Now, like I mentioned, the variable board setup is going to have a big influence. What you're doing is you're drawing these quest cards in order to get bonus points to try and achieve for the end game scoring. Now, as I mentioned, the variable setup is going to matter. Now, the question though is when you're rolling, so how are you figuring out which area gets activated in this game? You're rolling dice. And so there's a little bit of that Catan-esque element that you have to be aware of. Now, how do they mitigate that? How do you just get the worry taken away? Because, if Catan, you just don't roll where your guys are, you're never going to get the resources that you need. Or are you going to be able to mitigate it because you just can never get to sheep, like that ever happens. But you just may not be able to get one resource, and your whole game plan is basically SOL, because you just can't do what you want to do in the first place. So what happens is that this number gets activated, but it also activates the 2 on either side of it. So it's not just that one. So when you're placing your companies at the beginning of the game, because you all get to lay them down, I think 2 per player, or 3 even, you get to choose whichever ones you want. So not only are you thinking about what number you're going to be playing on in terms of the rolling, you need to be thinking about, okay, well, if a 7 gets rolled a lot, well, what's next to a 7 as well? So maybe I don't want to be on the 7. Maybe I want to be on one of the sides of the 7 instead. Maybe I want to be on both sides of the 7. Maybe I want to be spread out completely evenly so that in case anything gets activated, I'm close to almost anything. That's what you're having to think about. Then you're going to be using your cards as well as the abilities listed on the companies in order to buy more cards, in order to build more companies. You have the ability to do startups, which don't generate revenue, but you also can't make losses on them because you are having to continually at the beginning of every player's turn or round pay whatever losses are accumulated or whatever revenue is gained. The other avenue of this game is the auction phase. So if there is no company on there, or if there are not enough companies on an area that is activated, and that's only on the number rolled, there becomes the auction phase, where you are bidding then to put out a company on that area. Why is that important? Again, going back to the beginning, first person to get one on everyone wins. That is what the game is in a nutshell. Does auction, does action selection, does a little bit of luck, a little bit of take that, a little bit of economic revenue, paying for losses, taking loans out, does that interest you? Do you like orcs? Then this is a game that you should check out. This is something, again, I haven't really seen this combination of things, so this may not be for you, but there's enough, again, previews, Game Boy Geek, Man vs. Meeple. There's a lot of stuff out there that you can, again, take a look at. $49 is not an unreasonable pledge. I think it's well priced for what it is. It's just not going to be for everyone. I mean, I am not a big fan of auction. I am not a big fan of economic games. So for me, again, it's an easy pass, but I like the activation system. I'm really intrigued by how well that's going to work out. I would like to play this one. I wouldn't like to necessarily buy it, but I would definitely want to play it to see if it surprises me in that sense. And I think it's going to be a nice surprise for people because, like I mentioned, the activation system, the modular boards, how things are getting activated, the bidding, it's doing its unique thing, and there's no surprise to me that this is going to fund well over its funding goal because of that. There you go. Next up is Dawn on Titan. This is more of the exploration type game. Again, sort of like Orconomics in the sense that you are trying to have your influence in multiple areas in order to win. Now, instead of economic sectors and corporations, you are trying to put your corporation, your influence on all of the 7 moons of Saturn. $39. What exactly are you doing in this game? So you can see a little bit on this picture right here that you have different orbits in the circular pattern. And you can see that depending on which orbit you're in, the inner or the outer, you have the ability to travel different distances depending on how far you want to go, because as you're going, you're flipping these tiles over and getting resources that allowing you to grow, allowing you to build more industry, allowing you to do more things. There's 3 aspects of this game that you can be doing on your turn. You get 3 actions. The industry, just as it may suggest, is where you're building your ships in order to go around this map in the first place. Exploring is just the ship phase where you're moving them around. Again, depending on where they are and what orbit they're in, gives you a different distance that you can move up to. And then the industry phase is where you're building the industries that I mentioned, or playing cards that are going to help you build depending on which moon or where you are location-wise. You can also build 4 different types of industries in order to get the resources that you may or may not need that are in higher or lower demand. There is also a solo aspect with this game. I don't know. I don't feel this game as much as I would like. There's not necessarily as much information out here as I would like either. Reading through the rules, it's not terribly difficult. $39 is a nice price point, but I just feel like I'm just missing something. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is with a couple of these games like that. It's just a personal feeling for me. So will it fund? I mean, it's almost 40% of the way there. So I think it's probably going to fund, especially because it's got another 20 days. But I feel like this is a very different style of game, and it's not necessarily one as I would be interested even in playing as some of the other ones already on this list. Next up is a game I have never even heard of, but it's apparently the 3rd game in the series called Hunted. It is a 1 to 2 player game. I think it's really more of the solo game that you could play with another person cooperatively, but it's really intriguing. As I mentioned in the other video talking about, if I had more funds in general, this is a game where I would really be looking at, especially if you're a solo gamer. I think this is worth a shot because the simplicity, but the depth, especially just with the card play, it seems like, is something that is interesting. And I feel like, again, the solo games are becoming a lot more popular. This is already funded. And for a game I've never heard of at $15,000 in less than a day, it's pretty amazing. Must have more of a following than I realized. I've never seen this at retail, so there definitely is a limited retail availability from that side of things, and it must have a very good element to it, because otherwise, again, if the first 2 didn't do very well or weren't very well thought of, this probably wouldn't be either. $35, $45 with a playmat. So what are you actually getting? You can see just sort of the setup right here. And like a lot of the other solo card games that we've seen, there's a lot of deck manipulation. There's a lot of flipping, playing, choosing, pressing your luck a little bit. And that's what this game is you've got this mysterious town and you're trying to figure out what is going on with your newfound alien friend. So Stranger Things, anyone? A little bit of that theme-esque. So But the aesthetic is really appealing. I like this. You can see a little bit like the Stranger Things, when you hit a portal, when you press your luck and a bad thing happens, you end up flipping these main deck cards over to their other side, from the purple side to the green side. Flipping over, upside down. Anyway, you know where I'm going with that. So what are you doing? The main thing is that this is, I'm not sure how this compares to the previous price points, but this has 3 times the content they say in other hunted previous games. So you are going to be getting your money's worth for a $35 game, because that's a relatively heftier price for a solo card only game. You can see a little bit of the aesthetic here. I mean, it's just appealing. So here you go. You're drawing cards. They're going to be done in a row. You can use those cards to find items, evidence, allies to help you out. If you want to get rid of them and clear it, it's going to cost you time. Time is the main element in this game. Oh, bad things happen. You flip the deck. You're transported to the other side. You have to find out. You have to reveal the boss monster and beat him. There's a little bit of dice for combat, but otherwise it's just straightforward. It looks like just a nice game. I mean, they talk about the fact that you're going to be tracking your stats as well. So it's not just deck mitigation only. You're going to have stats that you're going to have to be adjusting or using, especially with the combat side of things. And turns are relatively straightforward. Draw a card, hide, or rest. Now, obviously, you're looking at me going, Chris, well, these cards are double-sided, so what are you doing? Well, you're just doing the classic, okay, you can see what the card on the top is, so you're drawing from the bottom. And whatever icons are on that card tell you whatever actions are available. So there is a little bit of symbology, but this does not look overly complex or super hard to understand. That hide mechanism that I talked about, the hide mechanism is what you're doing when you're clearing this row. That's going to cost you time, and time is valuable. So just from the symbology that I mentioned, the left side of the card tells you what actions you have. The actions at the bottom tell you what actions you need to use in order to use that card in the first place. So you're using one card to activate the other down the line. Then the upper right corner tells you what benefit you're getting, whether that's another card, whether that's an ally, whether that's a stat, whether that's a bonus, whatever it may be. So obviously then you're going to be collecting these cards, you're going to be collecting these items, you're going to end up fighting a boss at the end. You're going to have to be able to match the cards with the actions that they have and the icons that they have with what the monster has. If I was a solo gamer, this is the type of game that I could sit down, I could play, my kids could look over my shoulder, and I think it would be relatively intuitive. The depth or the strategy, my kids wouldn't be able to get, but what I'm doing, how I'm manipulating things, the turns I'm taking, how I'm using the cards to get the other cards, I think it's relatively straightforward. Looking over it, looking at the rule book, I have no question why this is funded now. So if I was a solo gamer, I would definitely be looking at this hard and heavy as a solo only game. Not a game that is, 2 to 4 players that you can play as solo, but hey, this is a designated solo game. It's going to work really well for that standpoint. If you're a solo gamer, check it out. Now, next up is Root. Root's almost at 1 million. Is anyone shocked? Is anyone surprised? No. This is the month, this is a particular week that's making it really hard on my budget, because I've said previously, Root is not a game for me. I like the idea of Root. I was all in on the first Kickstarter. I was one of the first people to get it. I really like the idea of it. I know it's a war game. I wasn't, confused or misled by the artsy, cutesy, illustrations. I understood it for what it was. I also understood that the asymmetry that was going to be there was going to make it tough for me to get it to my table, just by the nature of how we play and what we play and the people I play with. So I ended up selling it. It's fine. No big deal. Just when I think I'm out, they drag me back in. So the emphasis on this Marauder expansion is the fact that these 2 factions that are included in this expansion take the 2-player game and emphasize it and reinforce it alongside another element of things called the hirelings that change the gameplay even further. That, as you can imagine, hirelings, you hire them for your faction, your mercenaries, if you will. They've just called them hirelings. That's what they are. As I mentioned previously, one of the factions, it's a raise and burn, baby. Chaos, destroying things, conquering. The second faction, trying to find relics of a lost civilization, going deep into enemy territory in order to do so to achieve their objectives. Lord of the Board on Twitter, interacted with him a few times. He says this is a great experience, and he's like one of the Root aficionados, I feel like, in the community. And so I trust him when he says, okay, 2-player game, this is going to be good, you're going to like it. Which scares me because, again, I don't need any more games. I don't want anything else on my shelf that's not going to get played. And that's my biggest fear with this, is not that it's not going to be a good game. I don't think there's any question from Patrick Leader and the design team over there that this is going to be good and this is going to be something different. They have shown through the other expansions of Root that they are thinking outside the box. They're able to develop it in different ways, that the asymmetry is there, that it's compatible, that it's balanced, and it's worth it. The question is whether or not it's for me or for you. And that's the question I can't answer, which scares the heck out of me right now, because a $50 pledge for the Marauder expansion with some of these hirelings thrown in, with the landmarks, which offers another little tweak, another little caveat of interesting depth in gameplay, it scares me because that's a good price point to lure someone like me in. And the emphasis being on the 2-player game where I can play maybe with my wife repeatedly and we can sort of rotate is very tempting. Now, I guess a question here is, for $30 more, do I really need 6 more different hirelings? That would be the main thing. That was the suggestion to me that was presented as someone who is looking at more from that side of things. I guess the other aspect I don't really have answered is, how well do these factions work if I want to use one of the base game factions? Because obviously you need the base game with this expansion. Can I use one from the base game and one of these, and is it still going to be balanced as a 2-player game? That's the sort of question I need to be able to answer before I go in anywhere, and I'm guessing I just haven't figured it out because I haven't looked detailed enough in some of the FAQs, as well as just asking people, because people are going to be able to know, people are going to be able to answer these questions. So I'm going to get those questions answered personally. And if it's of interest to you, I mean, you need a dedicated game group for this game. This is, even more so than some of the Awakened Realm games, even more so than even some of the campaign games, the asymmetry, the depth of knowledge that you need to be able to play these games, because not only do you need to know and master your own faction and how they're going to interact, but you need to know what the other factions are doing and how the other factions need to achieve their objectives. Because if you don't know that, then all of a sudden it's going to be like, boom, I won, ha ha ha, you didn't know because you didn't pay attention to what I was doing, because you didn't have a clue of what my end game victory conditions were. That is the biggest concern with a game like this. And you're going to need multiple repeated plays over multiple short periods of time so that everyone remembers those as well. And like I said before, with how my group interacts, that's tough. So that's why this game is tempting. That's why this is going to be down to the wire one. That's why I'm tempted just to pledge so I can keep up with the updates right now. There are no exclusives with these campaigns. You're just going to get a better price. This is going to sell almost exactly the same at retail. Availability is more of the issue, and just the price point. I mean, they say, wherein the value they say is going to be $80 for this $50 pledge, you can guarantee it's going to be about $80. It's not going to be $60. It's not. It's just not. It doesn't go to retail at that price, period. If you didn't see it after the first Kickstarter or the second, I'm telling you right now, that's what's going to happen. So if you're going to get it and you are interested, you're better off buying it, and you can sell it for a profit, even if it is slight. So it holds its value, because you could sell this for $60 or $70 and someone's going to be willing to pay it, because eventually it's going to go out of stock, and you may even get a little bit more than what you would at retail in the first place. So I think it's safe from that side of things. But as I've said in the past, I am not a flipper. I'm not in this to flip things, and I'm not in this purely for a value standpoint. If Board Game Co. does a much better illustration of what is going to be value-wise, that is not where my emphasis is. And so if you want that emphasis, go watch him. He does a great job at that. But from a, will I get it to the table? Is it going to be enjoyable? What do I need to know about it? What do I need to know about the mechanics? That is where I am more concerned. And sometimes you hit on those and sometimes you miss on those. And that's okay. That's where my head's at. Now, the interesting thing, though, and I think the one thing you need to know about this campaign, is they are not offering the base game. They are not offering an all-in. And they have said, if you want the base game, if you want the other expansion, I believe the very first expansion that came out with the first Kickstarter, you have to get those at retail. So it's an interesting price point, but they say you can get them in your shop, also at other retail places. But I think right now they're pretty in between shipments. So I'm not sure how much availability there is. And these Kickstarter campaigns always tend to drive the availability down in the first place anyway, because people get reminiscent of it and want to pick it up because it's on the hotness. So you may run into a little bit on that side of things. So don't be surprised if you're looking to pick it up during the campaign. You're going to pay a premium. People are going to try and scalp it. And so if you want to get it, you're better off waiting, a month or two after the campaign ends, even if you're super hyped and want to play it sooner rather than later. Next up is Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. This is based on the Frank Miller 4 comic sagas that he did. And the interesting aspect of this game is it's taken the Batman mythology. And if you're not familiar with The Dark Knight Returns, it's basically Bruce Wayne is retired. He's 55. He's too old. Jason Todd has just been killed. He was the latest of the Robins. And now all of a sudden crime is just prolific. And he decides to come out of retirement, gets a new Robin, tries not to necessarily be like he was, but he is all grit. He's not the physical specimen that he was in his prime, so he's having to do things more unconventionally and just survive. And so that's the gist of this game, is you have these 4 campaigns, these 4 books that you are going through, and your objective is not to win necessarily. It is not to eliminate all the bad guys. It is to sort of mitigate things until you can get to the end and just survive, which is an interesting take, especially with the Batman mythos, because we don't commonly think of that with Batman, but we also don't commonly think of that with these games in general, of just make it to the end. It's, I need to win, I need to achieve this certain objective. No, this game is the opposite. This game is just don't lose. Don't lose, period. The other interesting thing is this is a solo-only game, and I think that is probably in combination with the super high funding goal, which is probably actually representative of what Cryptozoic needs, we'll come back to that in a second, to actually make this game or to not lose money. So I give them props for not putting in an artificially low funding goal. Now let's talk about that for a second. Cryptozoic and this depth of gameplay and detailed mechanisms, those two things do not necessarily go hand in hand. Now they have the DC deck building game, but again, the DC deck building game is not thought of as one of the most deep and the most great deck building games in the first place. It's good for what it is. It's very nice. It's fun. You get to play with your DC heroes, but it is not reach critical acclaim levels either. And so there is some skepticism, I think, there. Board Game Coffee has a video down here below, so you can talk a little bit about what it's going to show. They're very upfront with, you know, what you're getting. Batarang dice there. Take that for what you will. Again, another phrase I never thought I'd be saying. And there's a retail game and a deluxe edition game. But with a game like this, there's no reason that you back the retail version on Kickstarter, period. If you're interested in it, the retail version will be less, especially if you can get the shipping included at a later point. So it's either deluxe or nothing. Now, what's the difference? You're getting a slipcase, and you're getting basically what sounds like miniatures. 17 miniatures. And I like the aesthetic. People who are more familiar than I on the Frank Miller side of things say that this aesthetic is very true to the comic book aesthetic. It stays true to that sense. So if you're not a fan of the aesthetic, it's not that they've changed things. It's just that maybe you just don't like the aesthetic that they did in the comic, and that's okay. And you get your various characters. You get your Batman, your Robin, your Gordon, your Green Arrow, your Two-Face, mutant leaders, Joker, and even Superman. But they say Superman is actually working for the government, and so you may have to fight him as an enemy. Because, I mean, Batman's a vigilante, so government and vigilante. So you're going to go up against him. And here are the rest of them. You're getting some vehicles as well. What are the stretch goals going to be? And I think that may be the other make it or break it. So if they don't offer the stretch goals at retail, that might be the other reason. But I think as a non-solo gamer, again, this presses the button of FOMO right now. Because if there's something that is not included at retail from the stretch goals that seems more imperative to have, what are we going to see, and how is that going to be a tipping point? The other thing is, if this fails to fund in the first day or 2 or 3 days, are we going to see these stretch goals changed like CMON or some of the other campaigns have done and be daily unlocks? Is Cryptozoic going to feel the pressure? I don't know, but I'm going to be watching closely to see from that side of things. Now, and you can see already that if you go down, you're going to see some Kickstarter exclusives. Now, which are those going to be? Are those going to be just miniatures? Are those going to be gameplay content? As we get down further, you're seeing more of them and less of the blue ones. It's going to be telling. And I think that's going to really drive people either towards it or further away from it. I think you might be even wanting to hype and reveal a couple of these early so that you can drive some people into backing so they can get some of those extras. So marketing is going to be a big one on this. Like I mentioned, you have these various scenarios. The board is very unique. You don't see a board like this in the first place. You are actually going to be able to draw with a dry erase marker or a wet erase. You're going to be able to draw with a marker on the board to create paths between these destinations and allow you to get there when you may not be able to otherwise have a direct route there. You can even destroy locations on the board so that they may influence what happens there in the future or how it influences other places after that one particular place has been destroyed. So they've taken a few unique mechanisms that you have not seen before. So I give them credit for that. You have to get enough clues, and you got to find the boss, and you got to defeat the boss. And so it's a time thing as well, and you can't have too many riots, you can't have too many bad guys. It's a mitigation thing. It's a survive thing while managing all of these things as a solo. If you looked at Pandemic and said, you know what, I wish they made a solo version of Pandemic and they themed it with superheroes, this is what that game reminds me of. Is a mitigation, only in the sense, again, like I mentioned before, instead of stomping out the Pandemic and playing multi-handed as a solo person, it's just taking that all, incorporating it, and making it one-handed for the ease of doing it, and just surviving instead of trying to win. Board Game Coffee, Game Boy Geek, One Stop Co-op Shop. So you can see what's out there. You can see a little bit of what it's actually going to play like. Check it out. I mean, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be intriguing regardless of how it does. And it's going to either pave the way for them to want to do this in the future, or it's going to cause them to rethink things and, you know, make sure that things are as consumer friendly as we need them to be nowadays with the competition that's out there. Next up is Wutaki. Now this is a very interesting theme for a heavy, highly interactive worker placement game. It's going to fund. It's 2/3 of the way there already. So I mean, the basic concept behind it is it's a strange island. It's ruled by tribes. These tribes believe that they angered this giant monster that's living in the volcano and that they worship, and the volcano's going to erupt. So you have to soothe by gathering resources to be sacrificed in order to fulfill these powerful pacts and omens. And each of your leaders of each individual person has the power for elemental manipulation. You can use omens to affect the other tribes on the island. Core is $54. The all-in with the gameplay is going to be $72-ish. And it's going to get you a little bit of extra stuff as well. Stretch goals and the specialties expansions. So you've got a couple different expansions, more of a modular mini expansion there. And the all-in is just going to get you upgraded resources and metal coins. So like I said, you get your different element. You get your packs, you make sacrifices based on the elements and the resources that you gather. Then you send out your workers. They're the ones obviously gathering said resources. You have the omen cards that allow you to interact with other people as well. Use them as a sort of even a take that. And then you're climbing this pyramid, they say, in order to sacrifice and to even potentially end the game before anyone else is ready. This definitely has a unique theme. I don't know how it stacks up comparatively to other Euros that are out there. I think that's always my disclaimer for Euros on Kickstarter, is that I think there is such a cutthroat scene already at retail, and you see many, many, many more go to retail, see success there, that a Euro game on Kickstarter I think is sometimes more of a bigger risk than some of the Ameritrash games. Not necessarily in a bad way, but just that there is so much more proven, and that's a perception thing, but it's also a Kickstarter thing. So how much of that are you willing to go for? Because I've never seen anything like this. And the sacrifices of the workers, I think, is definitely unique. So I think it's worth talking about. The theme is absolutely unique as well. And the modular boards and the round cards and how you're sort of setting it up makes it a different game each time. It's just whether or not this is, again, going to be for you in terms of a Euro. Because some people like the drier theme. Some people like the more incorporated theme. The mechanisms, how much thinkiness, how much interaction. This is going to be more on the higher end. If you don't like that, you're not going to like this game. But if you like more of the cutthroat, I think if you like, maybe this is completely probably an incorrect comparison, but if you want more of the food chain magnet where there is some direct cutthroat competition, cutting people off, not allowing people to do things that they might want to do, this seems more in that element. So if that interests you, it's about priced where I would think it'd be for a deluxe Euro for all-in gameplay, about $75. That compares to Stroganov, which I talked about last week, which is the 72 or 75 as well for the deluxe version. So very comparable. It's just maybe what is your theme? What is your preference? Do you prefer a track? Do you prefer super layered options? Do you prefer resource management? Where is your preference? There you go. Now, this one flew under my radar. Shelf Clutter had it on his radar. I don't know where he got the info, but he was right. So, because if I would have known about this too, I would have been hyping this up last week. Aeon's End is one of my favorite games, period. I don't play it enough, but I have almost all of the stuff for it. And it is a game that's going to stay on my shelf forever, period. And this is Aeon's End Legacy of Gravehold. Now, why do you need to know about this? One, because the regular Legacy version right now is completely out of print at retail. And so I don't know what's going to happen with that. It makes me a little concerned about just in general how much of those printings, because I think Aeon's End has had that trouble with some of the other base games or the early expansions like War Eternal as well, where the price gets jacked up because the availability goes down. And if you're backing it on the Kickstarter, it's been sort of a little bit of hit or miss whether or not the price point is as good as you would like, but they have some exclusives that usually come in the form of 1 or 2 mini expansions or small expansions at retail. So it's exclusive, but not always totally exclusive, if that makes sense. And the price point is not as good as I would like. Again, not nearly to the level of the Root and the Root expansions and the difference between the Kickstarter pricing and the retail pricing. As you can see, I'm already pledging. I wasn't kidding about that. So it's a campaign game. It is basically a largest campaign game. It's got more nemesis. It's got more heroes than any other campaign game. How do you feel about campaign games? How do you feel about campaign games with a deck builder? That is the sort of question you have to ask yourself. And I think the biggest question is, if you're familiar with Aeon's End, how much Aeon's End do I need? How much is too much? That is my biggest question. And honestly, right now, I don't think the answer to that is I have enough at this point. Not because I don't have enough, because honestly, the answer is I have way too much. And I'm probably not going to get through any of it anytime soon. I haven't gotten through the first Legacy game. But I think as a person who really loves this game, I know that I will like this. I know it's going to be good. I am not concerned about whether or not it's going to hold value, because I think it will, because of all those reasons I just mentioned. I think the gameplay is there, the innovation is there, as they've shown previously, the difficulty is there, and just the replayability is there. Now, the biggest issue I have with some of these games is I don't need everything to be standalone. I have 16 copies now of the Stronghold dials and the enemy boss dials and some of the basic, crystals. I just don't need more of that stuff. So I wish at some point they would, appease us returning backers a little bit on that side of things. It's not going to happen, but I'm going to put it out there because I think it's worth mentioning. $79 gets you the Legacy game plus the Ruins expansion. So everything that you're going to need, that is where everyone is going right now. There's a bunch of other little expansions. There's the wave thing that they're doing here where you can order previous stuff, and it's not just one game, but it's like 2 games bundled, so you can get them for maybe a little bit of cheaper price. I haven't looked at whether or not that price is good or not compared to retail, but I think again it matters on whether or not the retail availability is there in the first place. I love everything about this game, and this is a game where my kids get a little older and we're going to play a whole heck of a lot of this. This is going to take the place of something like Marvel Legendary. As much as I love the IP that's with Marvel Legendary more, and the Age of Apocalypse and the variations of the heroes and some of the things they do, this is the game that is much more strategic depth of what I'm looking for in a deck builder in the first place. So there you go. It says flat out, twice the narrative content of Outcasts, more than that can be done in a single playthrough, 20 mages, twice as many nemesis, 50% more supply cards. So if that's not going to get you in at a $79 price point, I don't know what is. I mean, that's just a ton and ton of content. They offer a reset pack. They offer, a run through. I don't even want to see it. I don't even need to see it. You either know enough about Aeon's End at this point, or you don't. And if you don't, you go check it out on Board Game Geek. You pick up a copy and you late pledge this, or you back for $1 and you get in the pledge manager. This is a known quantity at this point. You have envelopes to discover. You have nemesis mats. I mean, I am just excited seeing by this. Of all the things I am backing right now, this is the most for sure thing for me, period. I think that's enough. They're going to have stretch goals. They're going to hit some of them. Some are going to be promos that are going to be expansion. There's a few Kickstarter exclusives. Take it for what you will. There you go. Pledge points, add-ons, neoprene mat. No, I don't need a neoprene mat. Everything that you can need. Only other big criticism I have is that some of these artwork has been redone in the various iterations, and so if that matters to you, if you want a hand that's all the same of crystals and the starting cards, then maybe you pick up one of these accessory packs. If not, and you're like me and you don't really care, you just go with it. Aeon's End, awesome. Tiny Turbo Cars from Horrible Guilds. This is by the company that did Railroad Inc., as I mentioned before, as well as King's Dilemma, and so this is a little bit of what I expected and a little bit of not what I expected. And they are literally just funded by the time I started this video. So what are you doing? This is a racing game as an action programming game. And you can see the controllers right here. Now, I didn't know what to expect when I first looked at this. And I was like, you know what? That sounds like really gimmicky and it sounds kind of stupid. And it doesn't really seem that appealing. Like, how is this going to be appealing? How is this going to fund? Like, this is completely different than a lot of the stuff I've seen. And I'm surprisingly impressed by this. I was not expecting to be impressed by this. They've got an exclusive expansion, which Horrible Guild has done with Railroad Inc. So you're going to be getting your money's worth if you pledge. And that is only $31, which is not at all the price point that I was expecting. That is a lot less than I was expecting. Now, the collector's version gets you the 5 to 6 player expansion, the Adventure Crew expansion, the Space Team, the additional track boards. So that reminds me more of the Horrible Guild that I saw previously in the Railroad Inc., where you could get the 37 different expansions with the individual dice and the slight variations on Railroad Inc. in the first place. So the question just is more better in this situation, or would you be better piecemealing it, or can you piecemeal it? So let's see real quick. How many of these expansions can you buy individually? Yeah, looks like you can buy them all individually. So what are you actually doing in this game? So that little controller that I just mentioned right there, sliding puzzles. So it's just a one-time thing. Like, you just do it and then you go. That's it. All of these things, forward, left, turn, over, around, ability, you just do it. You have wooden meeples. You've got different tiles. There's different obstacles. There's different hazards on the board. You run into stuff. You get powered down. You have to repower yourself back up. And it's first one to the end. Like I said, build the track. Choose your car. Start your engine. Go. Don't run out of battery. So if you take damage, you lose a battery. Like I said, use the recharge command on your controller to recover energy. Unleash the power of the turbo. More energy you go, faster you go. First one across the finish line wins. That's it. This is not a super complicated game. This is not a necessarily long game. It's just a racing who can program, who can slide that little thing around. You know, remember that little puzzle, of numbers like 1 through 9 with the 10 spaces, and you had to slide them around in order to get them in order? Yeah, I sucked at that. I would suck at this game, but I've never seen a board game take these elements and put them together. I've never seen a board game use that little sliding table element. You see it on game shows and like Survivor all the time about the manipulating things. I've never been able to do that. But if that is something of interest to you and you want to combine that in a speed element as well as a racing programming thing, 2-3 elements that I've not seen seldomly used in board games, let alone used in this combination. So that's why it's funded. And they put out a good product. Say what you will about the exclusivity stuff and the expansion stuff, they put out a good product. So you're going to be getting a quality product. There's not a whole lot to wonder about with this one, about what it's going to be and is it going to really turn out to be. What you see is what you get in this game. And so if that is of interest to you, I think go ahead and back it. I think it's a safe bet. I think it's something unique. I think it's something that would be a lot of fun with the right crowd. I am not that person. I am not that crowd. Would I play it once? Absolutely. I am a play as much as possible to experience these sort of things. But this is not a game I would need to own. But it's already funded. It's less than 24 hours in. It's going to hit a bunch of stretch goals. See what comes with it. If you really love it, yeah, those expansions are probably just going to add a ton of fun. But if you're not sure about it, I'd probably just wait for retail or pick up whatever's exclusive and see what happens then. Good price point though. Tiny turbo cars. Good job this week, guys. Finding Anastasia's up next, and this is sort of a retheme, a little bit of a coup, a resistance, with a little bit more depth to it, where you are asking questions of your fellow competitors, trying to figure out who's Anastasia. One person is also the Empress, back in a la Russia, during the time of the Tsars, and trying to figure out who is going to be potentially coming for her crown as the rightful heir. And you're going to be using deduction, you're going to be using questions, like I said, in order to figure out who is who, in order to take different actions more than just the questions of, okay, what's your allegiance, what's your role card, which clue cards do you have in general? And so each person is going to have their own envelope that contains their role and 3 clues. Anastasia has 3 clues, everyone else is given 1 and 2 not a clue card. So you're trying to piece it together. So there's a little bit more information than say with resistance in that sense, or coup, where you just have the card with an ability. And you're just going to be going around trying to figure out who's who and piece it together with a social deduction aspect. The aesthetic is something different I have never seen. It's really light. Here are the other actions that you can kind of do when they have this little board here. They have about 6 different actions that you can be doing on your board with these gems that you'll be able to spend after you ask somebody a question. Enchanted gem expansion. So as is all the rage, everything is getting an expansion already when it launches on Kickstarter. The deluxe edition is $39. The all-in for the expansion, the mat, and the coloring book is going to be $75. Again, it's a social deduction game. I think these are very hit or miss. This is a very niche theme, and I think that's either turning people on or turning people off. And it'll be interesting to see, because I don't know if this is going to fun. I wouldn't be surprised either way, but it's a different take on the deduction theme than we've seen. So if you are a heavy deduction, heavy party type person, and you're looking for something new, check it out. Next up is Cakes, sort of a different take on the Rhino Hero-esque building, where actually you're competitively building, and there was no rule book out initially, so I was kind of guessing last week how it actually plays. And so what you're doing is you're actually drawing a card and everyone's building it. Whoever builds it first, even just that one cake, gets to keep it, and you keep doing that, and whoever's cake is the highest after all the cards are out, or if someone reaches 10, wins. I mean, that's basically all it is. And so it's already a third of the funding goal. This is a very light game. It's a very quick game. It's nothing nuanced or depth, just like with Rhino Hero and that sort of type of building game. What you see is what you get. And if you like it, you're going to go because it's got a good theme. It's attractive to the eyes. But if you don't like dexterity, if you don't like a little bit of real-time element, this is not going to be for you. Nothing about this is going to change things. Like I said, straightforward. Check it out. Next up is Ragnarocks. I'm backing this already because I'm interested in it. I'm not sure because, as you can see, it's by the designer of Santorini. I love the idea of Santorini. My wife, however, does not like the actuality of Santorini. And so that is where my dilemma is how different is this going to be? Now, I will say that when Santorini came onto Kickstarter, as a little bit of history to make you aware of, the white box Santorini goes right now, the Kickstarter exclusive one, with the upgraded like elements and such, for a significant price higher than what it was on Kickstarter. And so with the design element that you're seeing here with Ragnarocks, my concern or my question would be, would this do the same? Because again, similarly to a couple of the other games, even just Cakes that I just talked about, is what you see with this game is what you get. There is not a whole lot of mystery. There is not a whole lot of, I wonder what it's going to be like. This is a straightforward two-player abstract game, period. Abstract games are very, I know what I'm getting into, and you're either going to like it or you're not. And the question just is, not for me necessarily, am I going to like it, but is my primary playing partner going to like it? And that's how I need to look at these games right now, because there are plenty of these games that I like that I know she is not, and vice versa. And like I said, blow it up right here at the top. More exclusive cards. This version's not going to be at retail. So if this game is anything like Santorini in how it's thought of, this version will go to steal Board Game Co.'s side of things in this video. This is going to hold its value and then some, period. The price point's $45, which for an abstract game, it's a lot. It's a lot for an abstract game. Most abstract games are going to cost you somewhere on the realm of about half that. But you're paying for the premium. You're paying for the miniatures. You're paying for the upgraded board. You're paying for the insert and these upgraded runestones. So you're paying for it, period. I mean, they talk about this version not going to be at retail. How much of this is going to be at retail? Because the retail version of Santorini is considerably cheaper, I believe, is the biggest criticism, in that it's just the quality is just not there. What is going to be different? And then they talk about these being Kickstarter exclusive, but that's not a make it or break it for me. How much cheaper is it going to be? Because I don't also think it's going to be that much cheaper, because I think you're still running Santorini something like 20 or 25 bucks. Now you've got the Norse mythology, names that you may be familiar with, and more from the Norse mythology if you're an MCU fan. So there's plenty of that, like with the Greek mythology that they did in Santorini. They're going to be revealing them slowly over time. There's like some exclusive ones, and it's really straightforward. Move in a straight line, play a piece along somewhere on that straight line, box stuff in. When everything is boxed in and every Viking is separated, score the game, it's over. That's it. And you have different myth cards, different powers essentially that you can use, just like Santorini, to change it each and every time. This is not going to be a question mark of what you're getting yourself into in this case. It's a couple of videos if you actually want to see it get played. They talk about shipping down here. It is what it is. It's straightforward. It's either for you or it's not. Are you an abstract person? Are you not? Boom. There you go. If you want abstract recommendations, though, shoot me a message in the comments. I'll make a few good ones if you're interested in getting into the abstract realm in the first place. The Red Dragon Inn 8. Pub Crawl. The premise of this game is you're heroes or adventurers that have already completed your D&D quest. You've looted, you've killed, you've collected, and now you've gone back to the inn to roughhouse, gamble, and drink. Last one standing sober with their gold wins the game. This is just another expansion, adding another element to that game. What it's doing in this is that you're going to be adding new characters, but new drinks as well at the pub. But then you're also going to be doing the traditional pub crawl now between other various pubs and inns, as opposed to just staying at the Red Dragon Inn as you have been in previously. It's a very popular game. I'm always a little bit surprised about how well these games fund. I've never had any interest myself personally in it, but I mean, again, that goes to each their own. And the nice thing is, or blessing curse depending on how you feel, is that this is a standalone expansion. It seems to be all the rage nowadays. Again, as I talked about it earlier in Aeon's End, you can go either way. I know you want to get people in at any point in your flagship, especially when it comes to something like this, but there are pluses and minuses to that. The basic premise of this game is very simple and straightforward. You have gold, you have fortitude, you have an alcohol level. The last person with either gold or that's conscious, like I just mentioned, wins the game. You're going to be buying drinks, and so that's where your gold is going to come in. And the more you get inebriated, if your fortitude level falls down to where your alcohol level is, you pass out and you're also out. In this game, you have your own individual character deck, and it's unique. They're going to have their own strengths, their own weaknesses, how they play, how they gamble, how they drink, how much they're able to drink, all of those factors being an influence. This game allows you to have a little bit more take that than your typical social games. It allows you to gain new cards as well as discard cards that you do not want during your turn, as well as to buy drinks for your opponents while having then to drink a drink yourself. There's various starting points in which you can get. You can get just this. You can get the whole shebang down here. It's really whatever you want. It's out enough, and there's enough reviews out there that you can see whether or not this game is for you and how it plays. You can see the 4 different innkeepers for the different inns that you're going to be doing the pub crawl in, as well as a little Starbucks reference there. And then just a little bit of how to play, try it yourself online, and going through the pledge levels. I mean, it's nothing break the bank on, but if you like this game, it probably adds another layer of variation. It's reasonably priced at the $35 pledge level for the standalone expansion, especially if you're looking for a game that doesn't have a lot of overhead or bulk to it. I know one of the games I just opened earlier tonight, way too big a box for the content. I wish something would have been done about that differently, but they're offering an eco-friendly version at this $35 level that basically gets you no box, and you can just put it in whatever you want and shove it wherever on your shelf it fits. So if you want the box itself, it's going to be $40. That's not a bad deal. I think that's probably enough. You either know about this or you can check it out enough, and you can even get a whole bunch of more other stuff along with this. They're going to have stretch goals that they're going to hit. They're going to hit a bunch of them. And if this is your type of game, get it. If it's not, I don't think this is going to change your mind on it either. Next up is Ludus Magnus Chamber of Wonders. And as you can see, I'm backing this right now, but I'm really waiting to dive in on the gameplay. I have not always been the biggest fan of Ludus Magnus in the past, but I'm giving them another chance because I think this game is a big departure, sort of like what Awakened Realms and CMON do. They've got sort of their Kickstarter heavies, and they've also got these light divisions. And so this is an LMS light, and it is completely different than what you've seen. It is more of a set collection, a collection in general of oddities that you're trying to make back in the day as sort of an impression upon your neighbors who can be the most haughty of them all and have the most unique items in general. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be bidding and trying to collect these into your sets in order to get the most points to impress your neighbors the most. The big emphasis that they put in this game is that you're going to have a lot of there's going to be variable setup, there's going to be variable rules that are going to take effect in one game as opposed to the next. So you're not going to be playing the same game twice. 6 different contacts, 5 double-faced areas with 10 different effects. So a lot of combinations there that are going to be different without needing a whole lot on top of things in terms of expansions. It's also a language-free game, which I appreciate because I know that that's a big issue for a lot of backers out there saying, hey, is this game actually going to be translated into my language so I can even play it? And I don't think about that often, but I think that's a nice selling point here. And I don't think that's probably done enough in general. So they've got a little bit of an early bird. You're basically just going to get a free pack in the first 48 hours. It's going to be a little Kickstarter exclusive. The basic pledge level is only 35 euros, which if they hit a bunch of stretch goals and Kickstarter exclusive expansions tend to be relatively good, I think this is actually a relatively good deal. I think you're definitely going to go for more of the collector's pledge. I think the deluxe edition, I think you're basically just getting a wood box with an insert already. And for me personally, I would rather save my money and do elsewhere. Wood meeples, contact cards, wonder cards, area cards. So just what you're going to be doing, that's a nice setup right there. You're selling me against the deluxe edition right now with this animation here. So what are you doing? I mean, like I said, collection of wonders. There's a little mini games that you're going to be playing. You're going to be setting up your wonders as a set collection mechanic. You're going to be winning the competition by, collecting the most points. But there's going to be new challenges throughout the game. There's plenty of videos, and so I'm definitely going to be watching those in the future. We're going to see what the stretch goals do. They're doing a daily and they're doing achievement unlocks. So we're going to see how much actually goes. My one problem I would just wonder about is how many of these little add-ons are they going to have? As you can see, they've already added one of their previous games. And, we'll see what else pops up. I'm interested. I'm going to watch this one until the end. Until I watch the gameplay video, I'm probably not going to make my mind up, but it has an early bird, so you're better off clicking on the early bird. If you have questions about it or you are interested, you can always drop it later very easily. Next up is Sins Season 2 from Cordudu Games. I was not familiar before I looked this up last week for the upcoming video. Sins Season 2 is a unique deck builder-esque, where, as you have seen more recently, not really the LCG model, not really the TCG model, but the decks comparison model. The decks model, where you're taking individual decks and just basically combining them all together to make a larger deck that people will play out of. And the gist of this is that they are just giving you a lot of decks with a lot of options, and they have gone more of the dark theme, as you can imagine, with sins. Gluttony, sloth, lust, envy, those sorts of things. And they've added a few other elements beyond just the core sins that you think of when you think of that. So the question just is, what is your feeling on this type of game? Some people love this, some people do not like it whatsoever. I think the main question I had on this game was, this artwork is very high quality. It's very nice. I like looking at it. It's a little dark for my taste, but, it is what it is. The main concern I had was this price point. So if I want to get just a single box with only 3 of these packs in it that I'm going to potentially combine, it's $60. That's a lot of money for 3 decks of cards. I know you're getting playmats and I know you're getting the stretch goals, but that's a lot. That price point is significantly higher than I was expecting. And then you're talking for even 6 battle packs. So double that, you're talking $109. Again, it's less than double of the 3, obviously, by about $11, but that's still a lot of money. I mean, that is a significant pledge, and that only gets you 6. Here you're getting the 6 and the 3 for $169, and then the triple deluxe pledge box, which is pretty much everything, is $242. That is a lot of money to spend on a game. Now, comparatively, obviously, to those other models that I mentioned of the TCG and LCG, $242 can be a pittance, but as a game that I had not really heard of before looking it up last week, I would be very reluctant to spend this when I'm not sure I like it in that sense. I wish it had a lower entry point. The barrier to entry is a little bit higher than I think I would prefer to see. If that 3-box intro set was like $30, even $35, that'd be a lot easier to swallow. And then maybe I think you'd be having more people that would be willing to experiment with it or give it a shot. Now, that being said, obviously, they're not hurting because they're already almost 3 times their funding goal. But I just wonder sometimes, marketing side of things, how that would be affecting their bottom line. You're getting a 72-hour booster pack. And then, like I said, you have all of your different sins as your battle packs that you can be choosing from. The newest ones from Season 2 are the Spheres of Torment that I mentioned. So you're getting the Wrath, Gluttony, and Greed. And then the Spawn of Minions, which are the Sloth, Lust, and Envy. And then you have this Celestial Energies, which is a whole different side of things. Expansion packs that you can be choosing to add in as well. And they have some Ancients, Titans, and Eternals. All in all, it's a relatively unique game. We've seen the packs go together. That's nothing new, but some of the elements of how they play is a little bit different. The one thing I'll say is reading through the rulebook and trying to get an explanation, the terminology is not as clean as I would have liked. I think it's trying to make up its own terms and use them to explain them, and sometimes simpler is better. Even if you're having to use terminology from other games and feeling like there's a little bit of overlap there, the easier the barrier is to get to the table, the more likely it is to succeed in the first place. And that's true no matter what the game, miniatures, cards, anything under the sun. How are you actually setting this up? Now, the interesting thing is, and this is why the price point is, they say that 1 pack is enough for 2 people. So if you're playing with 2 people, you only need 1. If you're playing with 4 people, you only need 2. So if you get that 3 pack, you've got enough for potentially 6 people to play all at once when you shuffle them together. So you're dealing the cards out, you're resolving whoever's first player, and then you're taking your turn. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get these little symbols to match up, and if you get a total weakness across all cards of 5 or more, you're going to be gaining a dominance. Gaining dominance allows you to win. You're going to be combo building, you're going to be buying cards, you're going to be activating them, you're going to be putting them into your deck. You also have the ability to attack to hurt the combos that the other person is trying to do. It's a very high quality product. I'm not surprised. Again, it's funded. I just wish, again, it was probably a lower price point because this is probably going to price me out when I'm looking at all the other things. But Cordudu Games, if you want to send me a copy of this, I would be happy to play it because I like card games like this that are a little bit of a different spin, whether it's Japanese games, wherever they're. So if you guys see this, and I'm happy to try it out. I'm happy to be out. It looks like you guys got enough support already though, so looks like a good product. That would be my only concern. So there you go. Next up is Business as Usual. This is more of the economic Euro worker placement style game. Has not funded yet, but it's 3/4 of the way there. So what are you doing in this game, and what are we looking at price-wise? So it's all in Canadian, so just be aware that's in this fine print right there, but the pledge levels are much more detailed. It's $52 US for the base pledge, and I don't think it looks nearly as presentation-wise as quality as some of the other Euros that have gone up on Kickstarter recently. So that's something that you got to be aware of. Now, aesthetics aren't everything, obviously. So what are you doing in this game? This is business, this is economic, this is cutthroat, this is highly interactive. Now, when it says highly interactive, what are you actually doing? And this is where looking in the rules here gives you a little bit more of an insight into what you're doing. And so they talk about the turn order here. Okay, you get your profit, you take and resolve whatever the event card is. Now this is the interesting part, because this is a more worker placement style game. You are going to be rolling dice to determine the number of actions. So I can see people being turned off by that, because in these worker placement games, they don't want to be left to fate. Because I think the question is, what if you're consistently rolling low and someone else is consistently rolling high? They're going to get more actions than you. They're going to get more profit. They're going to have more ability to do what they want in the game in the first place. Now, they break down in the rule book a little bit of what you can do in terms of movements, paying, toll booths, event cards that only affect you when you draw them. But they also throw in at the bottom here exactly the concern that I just mentioned. They said common house rules. Now, you're throwing in a common house rule. Why not just make it a variant? Why not make it an official thing? Why sort of the asterisks? They say if you don't like the dice roll, decide on a set amount of actions. Well, the question is, and what people like about some of these Euros is that you can't do everything. And that sounds a little weird, because I play the opposite games where you can do a lot of stuff. They want it exactly like that sometimes, where you want to choose and you have to make it very tight. If you don't choose correctly in the order and the sequence, there's not a lot of give. That's what I hear a lot of the Euro gamers like in games like Barrage or Food Chain Magnet or things like that. They suggest 4. Well, is that the optimal number? Is that going to be too loosey-goosey, where people can do too much of everything and everyone's just flying off the handle with 600,000 points? Or is it really going to be 3, where it's going to be a lot tighter? You're going to have to really think out your actions more. I don't know. It's just kind of a strange thing. I don't usually see a common house rule for a main rule in the game as a main action during the gameplay. That would make me a little bit wary to say, okay, well, which one actually should we be doing? So, I mean, there's a lot of interaction, as I mentioned. There's trading with players, there's trading with the bank, there's cards that you're going to be doing, mergers, improvements, lobbying, all sorts of stuff. I can't go into too much more detail, but it's something different, and it strikes me as more of an economic game rather than more of a strict worker placement game, now that I've more described it. I don't know where that falls. Are people liking, is that a big overlap between economic and worker placement? I just don't know. If it is, great. If it's not, well, then you're a little bit too niche even on Kickstarter, and that might be why it's having a little bit of trouble. So we'll see where it ends up. So I talked about this last week and I forgot to go over it, so we'll throw it in here at the end. This is Tharos. This is Spielworks' steampunk universe dice bag building game. So what do you need to know about this game? It's not going to be something that you're going to pick up at retail. There's just not going to be availability. There's only a limited amount. They're at, I think, 700 total right now, and they're just over halfway there. This is not a game where you're going to be able to find it, on the secondary market very easily. So if you're interested at all, it does something unique in the sense that it is dice bag building, like I mentioned. Can't remember the last one that there was a dice bag builder in that sense. And so there's a lot of interaction. I can't really give this game a good overview because the rulebook is a little bit denser with all of the things that you're going to be doing with the dice and bag building and action placement and the public building cards and the action cards and your own player cards and just the amount of variety and the depth that's there just with the sheer complexity. The thing I'd say is I'd read the rulebook if I were you, because this is a more difficult rulebook than a lot of the other ones that I've read on Kickstarter lately. And honestly, I'm going to be rereading it again because I'm still not sure, even though I'm backing right now, whether or not this is going to be a game for me as much as I like the dice bag building mechanic. Also, it's over $90 including shipping because the base price for this game is $72 US to begin with. And I know we're talking about availability, and I think if this game turns out to be good, I mean, it'll easily hold its value. But this is a much heavier game than I'm used to, so it makes me a little nervous, and so I'm holding it right now, but I would not be surprised if I dropped this. But just the uniqueness of it, the aesthetic of it, and how it's different than anything else that I've seen previously really intrigues me. So I think it's definitely worth taking a look at if you have any interest in something heavier with a lot more of the Euro style influences, as well as the dice bag building mechanic. It's definitely something you have not seen in combination before. Okay, so that is a heck of a lot of games. That is a heck of a long video. Hopefully you watched at least, a little bit of it. Or you just skipped around and caught the parts you wanted because, hey, that's cool too. So there you go. That is this week. The next couple weeks, I think, are going to be a little slightly less, hopefully. I wouldn't be shocked either way because as with this week, as with a couple of the last weeks, there's always a couple that pop up. There's always a couple that don't have dates quite defined, or their dates are just really hard to find because they're not publicizing them all over the place, as was the case with Aeon's End and Batman. So, I'll give you what I can and I'll talk about everything I can find, but sometimes I'm going to miss stuff. So if you know stuff out there too, hey, I'm always up for letting me know where, when, how, whatever it is. So I can mention it, I can talk about it, and we can discuss it further. Right now, what am I going to be doing? I got some tough decisions over this last week and a half about what I'm going to be keeping, what I'm going to be dropping. And so personally, I think probably at this point, I'm probably going to be keeping Aeon's End. I'm going to be keeping Block and Key. Shogi is going to be, I'm leaning towards keeping it maybe at a lower level, like the print and play-ish. Forest of Radgast is probably going to get dropped at this point just because of the competition currently, as well as the competition that it is going up against just in terms of the dungeon crawl scene. And then we're just going to kind of see what else and where else things fall, including things like Root. So that's where my head's at. Where's your head at? What are you looking forward to? Hopefully, maybe later this weekend, I'm going to have a video talking as well. I've been, swamped with this. So I'm hoping to have out maybe a Zombicide video still that's sort of half done. And then I've got one or two of those, actually. I've got the upcoming video for next week's Kickstarters, my top 3 games you should be aware of for the month of March. And then, who knows? Maybe I'll try and do a review on something that's been in my collection for a while as something new and different. And we'll see how that goes. I'm trying to figure out how we would do that dedicated gameplay setup. I don't think, the bed is going to be terribly great, but who knows? Maybe that'll be my thing. Gameplays on the bed. Whew. Phrasing. Sorry. Okay. We'll think of a different way to describe it. So there you go. That's this week. Let me know what you're backing. Let me know what you're excited about. What's coming up in the month of March that you cannot wait, or that you're skipping some of this stuff for right now? Let me know. Okay. You've been watching for way too long already. Go get some sunshine. Stay classy. See you around.